Yikes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency meeting on Wednesday, June 28th. Good morning, everyone, and welcome board members and guests to the meeting. I just announced who we are, and the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Public comment. After I open an item, let me see if I'm going in the right direction. First, we need to start with our flag salute, and then I will talk about public comment after that. And I'm asking Amanda if she would lead us this morning.
Salute. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Amanda. Okay. So, can we have the roll call?
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Howdeshelt.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Aye.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Sorry. Here.
We got a full house.
Good. Okay, so we're
I'm
going
not
to.
reaching over here to push the button. Not gonna do it.
Just leave it on, but don't talk. All right, so we are going to, item C, agenda review. Does anyone have any comments?
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Good morning, Chair.
Please, good
Board.
morning.
You have a pink in front of you, which reflects an amended agenda to item 11 on your consent. The county identified additional project savings on the Bowman Road Bridge projects and requested reprogramming of the STBG funding to the Forest Hill Road Safety Project before the end of the fiscal year, hence the pink.
Okay, anyone else have anything? Motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes. Howdeshelt. Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
I guess I was
Do
confused.
I say here now?
Wilkins.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, did we jump from roll call to agenda review and then right into consent?
No, that was actually, I think we were just,
Amending the agenda?
Yep.
Yes, agenda review.
Yep, okay.
Okay, so we're moving to D,
Yep.
AB 2449.
Madam Chair, regarding AB 2449, it's not needed. All board members are present or participating remotely with public access, so no board actions necessary.
Okay, so item E, approval of the action minutes from May 24th, 2023.
Howdeshelt moves approval.
Okay, motion second, roll call.
Broadway.
Yes.
Oh, should I have opened it up for public comment?
We don't typically, but we're just, yeah. We got a Burris. We got Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so moving on to public comment. This is where I want to say. After I open an item for public comment, this is actually following each item. So, public comment. Persons may address the board on items that are not on this agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Would anyone like to make a public comment? No? Anyone online?
We have a raised hand online.
We have a raised hand?
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
Yes, my name is Peter Eklund. I'm a resident of Rockland, and my question, my comment revolves around what is an agenda. The last meeting, I was prepared to make some comments on ridership statistics, which was item P. So if it has a letter, it's on the agenda. But there is no public input on informational items because I then realized because P was skipped. So I have a request, I guess, that people be allowed to make comments on informational items. But, okay, what I'd like to do now is make a couple comments on the ridership, which I wanted to make in May. You know, declines in ridership are really important for the board to look at. And so I wanted to make a couple of comments basically related to COVID. And I did some statistics and found out that you know, there's both good and bad news. On fixed route ridership, there's a pretty good rebound. Placer County is, on fixed routes, is now within 30% of the pre-pandemic number, which was immediately before the pandemic. Roseville is not doing quite as well. It's at 39% recovery. For dial-a-ride, it's now within 13% of the pre-pandemic. And the last quarter was when microtransit came in, and there was a 50% increase in ridership over the previous month. So microtransit seems to be working in terms of getting more people on board, at least for you know the short term. You know, we'll see where it stabilizes. There's no Roseville once again didn't do quite as well. It's been fairly steady, and is at 30 rather than 13%, is at 30%, 37% recovery. But on the other hand, microtransit was not introduced until late in the quarter, and so it doesn't reflect that. Of course, the opposite is true for commuters. The recovery for commuters is only 20% for Roseville and 14% for PCT. And so this is a real concern, and I don't know, I think you need to talk about it. I mean, it's happening. There are things that can be done, but, you know, it needs to be talked about, needs to be discussed. Vanpool, which is an interesting program and was quite successful early on, but it seems to have dropped under nobody seems to be looking at it. It's down 92% from pre-pandemic. Nobody seems to care about vanpools. You know, but it does kind of fall in line with commuter issues. I would like to make one comment. I also have looked at the decline in ridership since between 2009 and 2019, which is when the pandemic started. And both fixed route and dial-a-ride experienced major declines in ridership. It was 35% for fixed routes, 35% for Placer Transit, and 39% for Roseville. These percentages are considerably higher than nationwide declines during that period. There were some nationwide declines, but a lot of that is on, quite frankly, is on the operators, the cities, and PCTPA. There's been no discernible marketing or what we call TDM, transportation demand management, and there's work to be done. I hope some of this can at least be done during the short-range transit plan that's coming up, but
Mr. Eklund,
I don't know. I think ridership is an item.
Excuse me, Mr. Eklund, your 3
I'm
minutes.
sorry.
Your
I'm
3
sorry.
minutes are up.
But anyway, and I do request that you allow comments on informational items. It may not occur very often, but I think you should allow it. Thank you.
We do allow items, and if you have more concerns, please send an email to Matt Click, our executive director, and he would certainly be happy to get some answers for you.
I did. Okay.
Okay.
I did send emails to Matt and Mike Costa, just
Okay.
commenting on the need for the ability to make comments on
Okay. Well,
informational items.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll look into it.
Madam Chair, point of order. With regards to commenting on informational items in the Brown Act, certainly what I would encourage individuals to do is that if they have a comment on an item that is a non-action item on the agenda, that they raise it during that public comment period, just as Mr. Eklund did today. That would be the appropriate mechanism under the Brown Act at this time, or certainly to share those comments in an email form that can be shared with all the board members, but just to ensure that we are consistent, and we have been, so thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you again. Okay, moving on to item G, consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Any board members?
I have none.
Okay, any other members, staff, public? And nobody there. Okay,
Move approval. Second.
all right. Roll call.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez, Dowden Calvillo, Holmes,
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to item H, the consent calendar for the Airport Land Use Commission. These items are also expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Anyone, board members,
I have none.
staff, public? No one, no one on?
Joyner seconds.
Okay, motion and a second.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez, Dowden Calvillo, Holmes,
Aye.
Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, item I, Lincoln, California Passenger Rail Feasibility Study Final Report. Mr. Melko, take it away.
Good morning, members of the board. So we have a presentation today that will be provided by R.L. Banks. We have two guest panelists, Charlie Banks and Abe Zumwalt, with David Evans and Associates. So I will provide here a brief background, and then we'll get into the presentation by the consultant team, and then we'll hopefully at the end, if you have questions, we'll provide the answers and go from there. So, sort of as a refresher here, back in May 2020, PCTPA initiated the technical feasibility study to look at extending Capital Corridor to the city of Lincoln. And in June, a draft of that study was completed by R.L. Banks. And if you recall from the consent agenda in May, you all approved the contract extension so that we could complete this final report. And the final report reflects comments from us as staff, as well as from Placer County Transit and Roseville Transit, because they are the two operators that operate within that corridor. And today's presentation from R.L. Banks will summarize the final report's analysis and conclusions and their recommendations in terms of the feasibility of a rail extension, as well as other solutions such as an Amtrak, bus connection, to the Capital Corridor main line. And excuse me, the final report will be available soon after this meeting, because we'll want to reflect any comments or suggestions that you have, and that'll be posted to the board. So I do want to remind you all, as well as the viewing public, that this is a technical feasibility study, so it's not really a policy document. You're not taking any policy action here. It's an informational item, and so we're just presenting what we have discovered as part of this analysis. And with that, I will turn it over to Charlie Banks and Abe Zumwalt, and I will be the slide administrator, and and they will walk through. So, got the cover slide, and I'll go to the first slide, Charlie.
Actually, if you don't mind going back one, David, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for that excellent introduction.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlie Banks. I'm the president of R.L. Banks and Associates, a consulting firm focused entirely on rail issues and has since 1956, when my father founded it. I will be providing part of the presentation. The bulk of the presentation will be provided by Abe Zumwalt, who was at R.L. Banks and Associates when this study was completed, but has recently, sadly, moved on to David Evans and Associates. We all know that passenger rail was feasible to Lincoln approximately 150 years ago. This is a picture of either the first depot or an early depot. Approximately 150 years ago, passenger service began, and it ended approximately 50 years ago, so it existed for 50 years. The issue before you all is it feasible now, in the near term, or in the far term? So, next slide, please, David. We produced this draft, which you see a picture of on your right, and Abe and I are going to talk about 4 primary topics, which is a digest of the key issues in that draft final report. I will address the first topic, which is access to privately owned freight railroad tracks, and Abe will address the last 3, which are feasibility of rail service directly to and from Lincoln, in other words, an extension of the Capital Corridor trains. Roman 3 is the feasibility of an indirect connection to those trains via a bus service. And Roman 4 are our primary conclusions and recommendations. Next slide, please. Thank you. Access to freight railroad tracks is such a complicated issue. I was able to put my 2 children through 7 years of college. Thank God it's as complicated as it is. It is also somewhat counterintuitive. And let me start by saying that the Union Pacific Railroad was asked to participate and comment on this study, and it declined to participate. More importantly, neither Union Pacific, which owns the railroad which operates through Lincoln, or any other railroad in the United States, is obligated to provide access to its tracks. Cannot be obligated, cannot be condemned by Placer County, by the state of California. Even the federal government cannot condemn either a purchase or the temporary easement for a train to go in or out of Lincoln. There are really only 2 ways. I'm on the last bullet here. There are really only 2 ways to accomplish access. The first is that Amtrak enjoys a statutory right. If it says that it needs rail service, then it can achieve that. The last time it tried to do that, in which I was actually a witness, the railroads in the United States objected all the way to the United States Supreme Court that ruled in favor of Amtrak. But that kind of objection makes Amtrak very unlikely to support such an initiative unless it can be convinced. On the subject of convinced, Union Pacific Railroad also could be convinced if sufficient investment were made in its infrastructure and if sufficient payments were made. But the takeaway from this slide is it has to be convinced. It cannot be forced. Next slide, please, David. So access to railroad freight tracks has been hamstrung for decades by a lack of authority and a lack of funding. The second bullet points to the fact that the bipartisan infrastructure law of 2021 increased the funds associated with rail projects by an astounding 486%. So there may well be money that would be available to support a project such as the initiative under consideration. The real question is, how much will Union Pacific, quote unquote, require? So now that I've put all this in context, I want to turn it over to Abe, who will address the last 3 topics.
Thanks, and we'll want to move on to the next slide. So what you see before you is a picture of a Capital Corridor train, which today goes into Placer County via Roseville, Rockland, and Auburn, as I'm sure most everybody watching knows. And the reason why we have a picture of a Capital Corridor train is that if passenger rail service is extended to Lincoln, the PCTPA running the Capital Corridor is the most likely avenue by which we would see that extension. But there's a few different reasons why we might see it. If we can move on to the next slide, please. There's a happy fact in trying to get Lincoln on the National Passenger Railroad map, in that it is already actually on an important map regarding that service. The 2018 California State Rail Plan vision map included Lincoln, as you can see in the red circle there. It is just 10 miles north of Roseville, extending from those two blue lines, which represent Capital Corridor service. And there's a couple of reasons why it may have been inducted into the plan, even though the exact method of connecting Lincoln to the California State Rail network and the national network by extension was left to be agnostic between a bus or a train. This is because potentially that Lincoln's population has soared over the last 2 decades, especially during the pandemic. This also could have been given the fact that there is presently some other investments being made in the region, notably the Sacramento to Roseville third track extension, known as SR3T, which represents, of course, the second type of access that Charlie just spoke to, that being of improved infrastructure, being the third track between Sacramento and Roseville. And then finally, the South Placer Express bus service between Lincoln, Roseville, and Sacramento, which contemplates 15-minute frequency bus service between those three places. And so it's things are coalescing towards bringing Lincoln more into a statewide and national public transportation system. But what would it actually look like? If we can go to the next slide, please. Inferring the dynamics of the Union Pacific Valley subdivision and looking at Capital Corridor train performance today shows us that Lincoln to Sacramento is potentially quite fast, especially if what we're looking at right here is a potential timetable looking at the single train that extends railroad east of Sacramento today into Placer County. But instead of extending to Rockland and Auburn, what would happen if it went up the Valley Sub to Lincoln? And what we see here is that the trip would be relatively competitive with driving with no traffic, and given the present schedule of the service, that could be quite attractive, leaving Sacramento at 5:20 and getting to Lincoln just over half an hour later. But let's talk about who would actually ride it, how many. Moving on to the next slide, please. What we see here is a chart that the Capital Corridor Joint Power Authority produced in its most recent monthly performance report. And what we see here is basically ridership over the last several years, starting with the pandemic. The blue line represents 2020 ridership, as well as the drop-off you can see pretty precipitously there. However, each year after that, we're seeing an interesting effect in that the orange line is the year subsequent to 2020, the yellow line is 2022, and the red line is 2023. What we're seeing is a service that is essentially doubling its ridership each year in the wake of the pandemic. Before that, the service was mature and ridership was relatively stable into Placer County. Therefore, for the effort of this report, 2019 numbers were used. And this is because we're seeing right now, in the wake of the pandemic, the service return to its new baseline, which we believe is much closer to what it saw in 2019 than what it saw the year previous and the year previous to that. Next slide, please. For a baseline of ridership, the effort studying the South Placer Express was used, and this comprehends the travel markets between Lincoln, Roseville, and Sacramento specifically. When you break that down, it shows a ridership of around 11 passengers per trip, which we then employed in service of this effort. However, Roseville, Lincoln, and Sacramento travel markets don't tell the whole story. We can move to the next slide, please. What we see here is a breakdown of origin and destinations for ridership specifically coming from and going to Placer County on the Capital Corridor rail service. And while it shouldn't surprise anyone that Sacramento is the biggest stop, it represents merely a plurality of ridership demand as opposed to the majority. Because beyond Sacramento, we see about 60% of the ridership. And what this means essentially is, if we're just looking at a ridership estimate that comprehends Lincoln, Roseville, Sacramento, that's potentially only 40% of the demand that a corridor, which if extended to Lincoln would go all the way to the Bay Area, would see a lot more than that. And so to form a high bound of ridership, 11 passengers was then extended to 27, which gives us an overall estimate of between 8 and 20,000 passengers annually, given a single train. Moving on to the next slide, please. Where would they go? Were they to ride the train from the Capitol Corridor to Lincoln? We, for one station to be established, we looked at depth at 4 locations. From north to south, 2 were recommended by the Capitol Corridor Joint Power Authority itself. One in downtown Lincoln, actually just adjacent to the location of the depot that you saw on the first slide of this presentation. One next to the Marketplace development, just south of that. And then finally, 2 more auto-centric locations that we identified both at the present-day park and ride lot and then at another location off of the interchange with Highway 65 at 12 Bridges Road. Next slide, please. So what would overall, given these ridership estimates, the cost recovery look like? Well, if we take average fares and if we look at the overall length of the extension and the average cost per mile of operation for Capitol Corridor service, this implies an operating cost recovery of between 37% and 92%. And keep in mind that the Capitol Corridor itself boasted a number of around 40% historically, so this is good. However, if we move on to the next slide, we see that, of course, operating expense is only part of the story. Capital expense is much more intensive. Given the variable nature of what Union Pacific might demand, we contemplated 3 different options. One of a low build, low cost option that just thought about what would it look like to establish a pocket track, build a station to Capitol Corridor standards, and at each one of those 4 locations, potentially. A medium build option, which contemplated extending the extant siding in the middle of the Union Pacific Valley subdivision between Lincoln and Roseville to 14,000 feet, which would allow accommodating the largest trains that Union Pacific runs today. And then finally, a high build option of completely double tracking the corridor between Roseville and Lincoln. And what this results in, prospectively, is costs that range anywhere from $33.5 million up to $121.5 million. And of course, given what Union Pacific may or may not deem as reasonable in exchange for the capacity that this train would consume, the estimates could, of course, go above and beyond that. Next slide, please. So this brings us to our second option contemplated in the study. I think it's important to note that Amtrak Thruway bus services are an essential part of the National Passenger Rail Network. Indeed, the San Joaquin rail service, originating in Sacramento going south to Bakersfield, California, has relied on Thruway buses to provide between 55 and 70% of its ridership historically. So that's 55 to 70% of passengers on that corridor that take a ticketed Thruway bus at some point in their journey, which means that it's significant and proven. And people that ride trains in California know about these buses. But also, a Thruway bus connection to Lincoln is exciting for a number of reasons, given the fact that it's only 10 miles north of Roseville. Next slide, please. So this brings us back to the adjacent program of SR3T, access that's already being provided through the construction of a 3rd track, estimated to open sometime later in the 2020s. This is an exciting project because to Roseville, it will triple the present rail service from 1 train a day to 3, and potentially we'll see as many as 10 in the future. This is exciting because with more trains, we see a lot more ridership. And what this chart says on this slide essentially across all of Amtrak's state-supported corridors, and this is all of them. This is the California corridors, this is the Cascades up in Washington State, these are corridors in the East Coast and the Midwest. And what this shows is that with each round-trip frequency, we see not just a gain in ridership, but actually an exponential gain in ridership. That means more passengers per train. This is a happy synergy, and as this is contemplated and is built out in Roseville, we see that Lincoln could also benefit from the benefits of improved service. On to the next slide, please. So we're a thruway bus to connect to the Roseville Amtrak station, which can presently host buses, but is not very well connected to Roseville Transit nor the South Placer Express service. After departing the Roseville station, we would think that it would make a lot of sense to send the service north along either Highway 65 or Industrial Avenue, and then use the same route that has been devised for the South Placer Express. On to the next slide, please. What this schedule would look like, taking both the work that was put into the South Placer Express and as well as looking at a survey of Amtrak Thruway services in California, is that the time penalty does exist. The transfer essentially means the time between a direct train between Lincoln and Sacramento and a thruway bus between Lincoln to Roseville and then on to Sacramento would about double the time. On to the next slide, please. What this means, of course, is a transfer. And a transfer, per the most recent study, shows that a transfer can impact demand by between 10 and 40%. We were comfortable with that latter figure given a transfer time in excess of 10 minutes, looking at the standard that is employed on different thruway bus services on California's rail network. So applying that number to our initial annual figures of ridership, we see then an estimate of between 3,200 and 7,900 annual passengers if we have one bus connecting to the one train presently serving Roseville. Now, ridership, of course, would then be expected to increase if additional connecting bus frequencies were made with the trains that are slated to serve Roseville by the late 2020s. On to the next slide, please. What does operational expense look like for a service like this? Well, assuming Placer County Transit provides a bus for the service, and given their expenses, this would imply an operating cost recovery ratio of between 15 and 36%. So a little less than we saw by train. However, on to the next slide. Insofar as capital expense of one bus to meet one train, we anticipate very little, if any, upfront capital expense, given the investments already being contemplated and made in the South Placer Express, given the existence of the Roseville Station facility, which already serves buses, given the existence of Placer County Transit vehicles, and given the existence, of course, of Amtrak's thruway bus service fare integration, which would put Lincoln on the map in the national rail system and allow people from anywhere buying Amtrak tickets to buy service directly to Lincoln. Next slide, please. So from these two options of rail and bus service, we have three major conclusions and recommendations. The first being the fact that it would be worthwhile, most likely, to think about exploring grant options to indeed make that thruway bus connection to the single train serving Roseville today. Furthermore, given the fact that the Sacramento to Roseville third track project is happening, coordinating with that development and exploring adding additional Amtrak thruway bus services with increased capital corridor services to serve Lincoln directly would also be worthwhile. And finally, as Charlie mentioned on one of the very first slides, the bipartisan infrastructure law indeed expanded funding drastically, specifically for rail service, and it's done so in some pretty exciting ways. The largest program, far and away, in the bipartisan infrastructure law is the Corridor ID program. And what Corridor ID does is allows an avenue for an eligible entity like Placer County to really put legs down and explore what rail service would look like. And it does so by reducing the obligations to less than they've ever been before. And by that I mean, were an application to be submitted to the Corridor ID program upon its next notice of funding opportunity, at no match whatsoever, the Federal Railroad Administration, were they to accept the application, would provide a $500,000 planning grant to look at more heavily look at feasibility and environmental compliance issues. And considering submitting such an application is also a recommendation in the report, given the fact that especially that such applications are not intensive by federal standards. In fact, the most recent NOFO for Corridor ID was a 15-page narrative plus the usual forms. So with that, let's move on to questions. Next slide, please.
And that is our summary of the feasibility study, and we have the two consultants here to respond to any board questions. And of course, there may be members of the public that may have comments. And with that.
Okay, board members, questions?
I did just have a quick question when he was talking about the rail from Roseville to Lincoln. It looked like that might then bypass Rockland and Auburn. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
No.
I did not?
Why would that be?
Can somebody
Abe, you
explain?
want to answer that, please?
So I heard it the same way, but once you get up to 3 round trips, 2 can go up your way.
Okay, and one would go to Lincoln? Okay. Is that, Mr. Banks, are we assuming that correctly then?
You are assuming it correctly, and while obviously there are advantages in any corridor of having a lot of trains, a point which Abe spent at least 30 seconds on, the fact of the matter is it's hard to find places to host the trains overnight or whenever they're not being used. So there are disadvantages and advantages, like there are in many things in life, of concentrating the trains along one corridor. But we wouldn't presume to take trains from existing trains away from the primary corridor to run it up the valley.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions?
I don't have any questions, perhaps an observation or two. Lincoln, like most of our Placer County cities, was born of the railroad in 1859 and ran for well over 100 years. That opening picture is indeed not only our first train station, our only train station. So with respect to ridership, using the 2019 numbers, I know why you did it, but my own personal observation is this: the majority of our population increase is Bay Area relocatees who would happily ride a train down to the Bay Area rather than deal with the traffic. And the majority of those folks are seniors and retired, many of them with mobility issues. And so the bus solution would have to take that greatly into account. The more steps we force them to have to go through, the more difficult that journey becomes, the less likely they are to take it. If they simply show up at a train station, get on a train, and sit comfortably all the way into the Bay Area or wherever their destination is, that they're going to be interested in. But the more we complicate it, the less likely that will be the case.
I agree. Traveling right now on Amtrak, when you're going south and you have to get off the train, go find your bus, keep going on the bus. Yeah.
And the other observation is a simple one: assuming no traffic on Highway 65, as far as your time of travel goes, that won't be true ever again. The increased congestion on that corridor is something we're attempting to address, but I don't see it happening anytime in the not too distant future, probably. Even if we get the funding, probably a good 10 years out before we can begin to address that. So the assumption of no traffic assume heavy traffic and now calculate how much time that journey into Sacramento on a rail system will save you.
I agree, yes.
So question with regard to the frequency of the throughway bus, how often would that run?
It would run to meet, traditionally throughway services are timed especially to meet trains. So it would really be dependent on the services that it's connecting to. Today we see one train to Roseville. Therefore, there would be one throughway bus meeting one train, and it would be a guaranteed connection. As service to Roseville increases, as we recommended, you'd want to look at additional buses to meet each passing frequency to take advantage of the corridor effects which take place when you improve frequencies.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Probably a question for Charles. So, you know, the major elephant in the room is the owner of the railroad tracks, which is Union Pacific. Sounds like they were invited to participate in this conversation, but declined. So then that leaves, you know, you as a consultant team and us as the board really in a guessing situation as to what is the level of capital investment needed to basically buy our way onto the UP mainline. And do you have any thoughts, Charles, on how to encourage UP to engage in dialogue with us about that?
You summarized it extremely well, Mr. Wilkins. Anytime you want to apply to join my firm, you just slip me your resume, okay? You did an excellent summary there. The fact of the matter is that Union Pacific itself won't know until it runs a very complicated simulation program, which my firm has licenses to operate every year. And that will just provide, frankly, a floor for Union Pacific. I have literally spent 25% of the last 35 years negotiating with railroads. And in situations like this, the real problem is there is no market. So the public sector can't really go say, well, we don't want to talk to Union Pacific, we want to work with Burlington Northern because Union Pacific isn't being helpful. And frankly, Union Pacific, which would seem to be in an extremely strong position, and in many ways is, it has a problem too because it doesn't know how much it can extract. So unfortunately, the negotiations end up being very protracted. I think the three scenarios that Abe shared with you all are reasonable expectations of what Union Pacific might demand. Hopefully, Union Pacific wouldn't require more than the high-end scenario. Fortunately, there is not a lot of freight rail service at the moment that goes through Lincoln. So that should be a plus in terms of both less costs and less resistance from Union Pacific. But again, Union Pacific knows it cannot be compelled, and so it is sitting in the catbird's seat. I hope that's a good answer to you.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. How do you get them to even talk to you in the first place?
Well, your question, Mr. Wilkins, doesn't go to a study. I assume it goes to an action. And if the action is, the best way to get them to be interested is to begin to assemble money and to, in essence, dangle it in front of them. The railroads may not seem like a dynamic industry to any of you, but the fact of the matter is the few people at Union Pacific who are responsible for this type of activity, they are besieged by literally dozens of requests from all around their 21,000 plus mile system. And they are acting in the same way that you and I would, which is to try to figure out which ones are likely to be the most beneficial to Union Pacific. So the short answer is they will be unlikely to talk to you until you pass some resolutions and at least put together some sense of funding. But I don't think they are impossible to talk to. You just have to be reasonable and approach them with people who they will accept as credible. Unfortunately, it's kind of a small society, but people who are ex-railroaders, including me, who used to work for a predecessor of Union Pacific, can get their foot in the door, and that's essentially where you start. Is that a satisfactory response to you, sir?
Yes, thank you.
I might,
satisfactory, or is it just reality, right?
I might add that we would work through the Capital Corridor staff because they have the relationship with Union Pacific, and so that would be probably the most advantageous avenue for us if we were to pursue.
And I wanted to, I appreciate that comment, Mr. Milko, because that was what I was going to add just now. In addition, the Capital Corridor staff has an unusual arrangement where they actually pay Union Pacific for on-time performance. And so not only are there infrastructure investments, but each train then provides Union Pacific with a premium. And the railroad happens to like that arrangement. They are exploring trying to extend it to other corridors in this era of new federal funding for passenger rail. And given that pre-existing relationship, you're in a slightly better place than other locations on the Union Pacific are working through that authority, but only slightly so.
Okay, further questions? Do we have any, yes?
No, just.
No, it's going for the public. Does anyone have a comment with this, regarding this item? Good morning.
Tomorrow. Well, a lot of good information here, really valuable study to have. I took the agenda item page literally, that it's not available to the public yet. And when it is, I would hope that you would make it available and invite public comment on it through some kind of mechanism and do it pretty timely. I have a couple questions and a couple observations. The Butte County Transportation in 1995 did a phase 1 study of rail traffic through Lincoln and Butte County and so forth. I just wonder if they've looked at that, and I don't know that there's another phase of that being done. And it was good news to hear that Lincoln is in the state rail plan. I wasn't aware of that. I think that's a very positive thing. But it does raise a question if the north of Lincoln is possible in the state rail plan. So I guess the question is, what about the public role in this kind of thing? It seems to be in these rail proposals, a support group or the pro-rail groups and things like that seem to get involved and help make things happen. I heard about it in a negative situation, like the train that fell in the Shasta River some time ago. A citizen group really got involved and helped promote some of those improvements that the railway made. So I guess those are my initial comments, and really welcome this. In terms of the new, what's it called, the corridor ID process with an application early next year, this is the new infrastructure proposal program, I guess. What would be the timeliness on that to get started on that, and who would make that application? Would it be this PCTPA or the county, and how would steps towards that come about? And I guess I'm talking to the consultants as well as you all.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Would anyone like to tackle those questions?
Sure. So I think on the corridor ID program, we would work with Capital Corridor. And so, we want to coordinate there because I believe they've already submitted an application for the current round for the ID program. And we certainly don't want to submit a competing application, against a service that we are a member of. So we would want to coordinate with that. In terms of next steps, in terms of planning, if the board is interested in this, we certainly could, I guess, with Mike Costa, who's our transit manager and lead, work with as part of our short-range transit plan update and take a look at certainly the Amtrak bus connection, with the Capital Corridor project. And we will work with Capital Corridor because, that's a project that's underway and we've spent a lot of time and resources over the years in terms of getting funding. And so that's going to be built. And it may be advantageous as part of that project to work with Capital Corridor to explore, doing an Amtrak, Capital Corridor bus connection from Lincoln, to Roseville, certainly because it'll bring more people, more riders, and that's always a good thing. But to evaluate all of that, we have a short-range transit planning process that is going to be initiated. And so we have a consultant team that will be able to look at all of that and provide us, the data and the expertise because Capital Corridor would need that data and expertise to go forward to initiate, with Amtrak about doing a bus service connection. So.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think it would be the better part of wisdom for the agency to concentrate on the third track project before we move forward with any discussion about a train to Lincoln.
One project at a time.
That's what I'm talking
Anyone else like to respond?
I would only say that we're more than capable of doing more than one thing at a time.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
a couple of questions. One, the bus connection would be in addition to the express? The express runs how many times a day? It's not like on a 30-minute loop?
During
5-minute
peak
loop?
periods is up to 15 minutes, and it runs on weekdays only, typically from, I believe it's as early as 6 or 7 a.m. all the way till the evening.
So that would.
That's still being adjusted to.
Right. So that's another,
But it does not yet exist.
That is correct. It should be, it's anticipated to begin
thank you,
early
Mayor
next year.
Joyner, for leading me into the second question. If we were to start this project today, to extend rail to Lincoln, would it be 2045 or 2055 before the first train ran? And that's for the consultants. Because, if you look at the Capital Corridor third track project, which is picking up steam, all pun intended, that started in 2015. And it'll add the additional trains in 2028. So we have to look, in order to serve a growing Lincoln, we have to look at what is the best non-automobile option in my mind. That addresses not only, folks who, have mobility coming from active adult communities that need to connect to a train, the frequency of those trains, 'cause that's always a debate. 6 a.m. is a great Mayor Broadway time. It might not be a great time in Sun City, Lincoln Hills. So I think our quest here is to accept the technical report, and I think that's, I'm going to move to accept that.
Second.
Okay, let's hear that one more person.
Peter, you're free to speak.
Thank you. It's an interesting study, but it's very dangerous to do a study in isolation of all of other studies and things going on at this time. And unfortunately, that is a death knell to even the transit considerations. A couple of just general flaws in the analysis. You can't use an $11 fare. That's the highest fare that anybody pays it has deep discounts for multi-rides, very deep discounts. The cheapest way to ride to take rail to Sacramento is to buy a Roseville Transit Pass, which the corridor accepts as payment for a trip. And it's half the cost. Okay, so that's one problem. The other problem is the South Placer Express is not a bus rapid transit. May have a bus rapid transit, bus itself, but it doesn't meet any of the qualifications of what really bus rapid transit is about. If you want to use, when that thing comes into effect, it will be the most expensive trip to Sacramento and take the longest time. So, it doesn't serve the demand either. Lincoln and West Rockland are intricately linked in terms of transit planning. You can't, if you're going to go from Lincoln to any place, you're going to go through or besides West Rockland. And West Rockland has no commuter service. There's been 3 transit plans, and and nobody has even suggested it. And it needs some transit service too. So they are inextricably linked, and that needs to be considered as part of the new transit short-range transit plan. And that's where this project belongs. Lincoln doesn't need it. And let's just see what happened in Rockland. The corridor dropped most of the buses from the Rockland station. There's 2 buses leaving from Roseville that Rockland has no access to. And in fact, PCTPA had PCT look at what it would take to provide a route. Well, it would have been extremely expensive. But PCTPA, is providing, Ubers as part of its service to the Sierra College. Why not set up a shuttle service to Roseville for the first two trips that go there? There's a demand in Lincoln and Rockland for those 2 trips, and there's no public transit to get there right now. So,
could you please wrap your comments
it's a good transit it needs to be considered as part of the transit plan, short and simple.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments. Would anyone like to address?
If I could, through the chair, just quickly, with regards to both comments, and which are very much appreciated, and just to reiterate some of we've been going 40 minutes now, so I want to remind us where we started, and that's the fact that, this is a technical feasibility study to address a very specific issue in a very specific corridor. It was never intended to be, holistic or programmatic in its scope. And so we at PCTPA are going to receive this study, and then it will inform both the short range and the more comprehensive rail planning and transit planning that we're going to be performing through Mike's short range work that you've already heard about, and the transit parts of the RTP. So I do want to appreciate the comments and recognize that it is every intention from the agency's perspective to incorporate that into larger and more robust transit efforts moving forward.
Okay. Were there any other public comments? Okay, so this item, they're asking, staff recommends that the board accept the Lincoln Passenger Rail Feasibility Study final report as complete for the purposes of the State Route 65 capacity and operational improvements project settlement agreement. Yeah, we've already got it. We have a motion and a second already, so you can
We'll
take
take
that.
roll here. Broadway? Is out. Burris?
Yes.
Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Holmes?
Yes.
Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Joyner?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're going to move on to item J, I-80 auxiliary lanes project progress update to execute utility agreement amendment with PG&E. Mr. Melko.
Okay, moving from trains to roads. So just as a background, particularly for the public, the I-80 Auxiliary Lanes project consists of two locations. Location 1 is basically a true eastbound auxiliary lane from State Route 65 to Rockland Road. And location 2, we are adding a fifth lane westbound from Douglas Boulevard to Riverside Avenue. The fifth lane is a gap closure. It basically goes, our current freeway there is 4 lanes, and when we get to Placer County, Sacramento County line, it goes to 5 lanes, and so this will create 5 lanes through that gap. So, as part of our project here, we have conflict with 2 locations where PG&E has gas pipelines that cross the freeway. PG&E has done the work. The gas pipelines have been closed, they've been slurry filled, and so the work has been done. So the construction project that will go forward will not have that issue to deal with. May 24th, we had extensive discussion on this topic. A lot of good comments. So you all approved the First Amendment to the utility agreement with PG&E, and you authorized the executive director to execute the agreement and to disperse the funds as required by the amended agreement upon a satisfactory determination that the costs to deactivate the 2 gas lines are actual and necessary. And so it's determining the whether the costs are actual and necessary is what we've been working with PG&E during this month. And we've met twice with PG&E, and we've had actually, that may sound like we haven't done a lot. We've communicated extensively with PG&E during the course of the month. And PG&E staff are here today to respond to board questions. They've recently provided us invoice information regarding the hydrovac excavation costs. We were particularly interested in that because it was a fairly large cost increase as compared to the original estimate. And, we need to look at this data, and PG&E has indicated there will be a cost reduction with their final revised invoice. And at this point in time, we need to look at the data and then, get back together with PG&E and continue to discuss this issue. So you have with us today John Costa, who is the Manager of Government Affairs. I'm not sure if Douglas is here. Okay, Douglas Moses Bateson, he's the supervisor with their gas distribution, and Tess Gatalerda, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. And she's the project manager for this particular gas distribution relocation project. And so they're here, and they have a slide that we will share, and then I imagine Tess will speak to, and of course, the 3 people will be able to respond to more questions. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay. And this is the PG&E slide, so I invite PG&E to the podium.
It's up here.
Hi, good morning. So I'd like to revisit the original scope of work and the final scope of work for PG&E Gas. So originally, we were to remove the 2 existing valves, decommission and cut off 8 existing gas main tied to 2 pipes, and then slurry fill and seal. So the final scope of work that we conducted last year was we done a relocation of the 40 feet gas main pipe and 1 service relocation on Melrose Avenue. We've also decommissioned and cut off 8 existing main pipes and slurry filled and sealed, in addition to the sand walls on Interstate 80. And last but not least, so we've discovered a cost adjustment, and the cost adjustment is $39,079.50. And we will work with Matt directly for further discussions. Any questions?
Put that slide back up. I can't do math in my head that.
It's right there on the cost adjustment part on the bottom left of that slide.
There we go.
Can you see it there?
14 minus 40 is 170.
Now, the 3rd line is just showing what PG&E shows as a credit. So
Right.
there's no math there.
Deducted from 214.84, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And if I could quickly through the chair, I just want to say as David's already mentioned, but just to reiterate, we've been working sometimes daily and at a minimum weekly with them since the last time the board met. And we did ask because, there were a lot of questions from the board for PG&E to come today, to be present, to see if there were any other things, any members of the board wanted to ask of them. I think we're getting very close to a final resolution on this. We're going to continue to work through some more invoices and do some more review. And I do want to thank Tess and the PG&E team. It's PG&E is a big ship, and I know she's reaching out to a lot of different departments to try to help us sort through and get those answers. And so I know it's been a difficult process for the board and for us as staff and PG&E, but I do think, as we continue to work over the next month, over the summer, we're going to get there. And I think we're really close. And I just wanted to thank them for coming today. And I'll yield if whatever questions the board has.
Madam Chair, I also wanted just to say that I do appreciate that PG&E is digging deep and taking this seriously and hearing our concerns, and that you've already identified a $39,000 adjustment. I don't know exactly what that equates to or why that is, but I do appreciate that you are willing to, like I said, take a deeper dive into this, so thank you very much.
Okay, other questions, comments?
No, I'd echo those comments as well.
Okay, maybe we'll open to the public, I guess.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I had my hand up.
Oh, good. Please.
I just wanted to make a quick statement that I am recusing myself from this item due to my position with PG&E.
Okay, thank you for that.
No action is needed today.
Okay, this is just informational.
She has her ears covered.
Yes, we do have, thank you, for reminding me. This is informational only. So do we have any public comments on this?
So I'm assuming we've had very large conversations around this and our concerns. I'm assuming that staff has carried those back, and they've been a big part of the conversations you've been having, so we don't need to repeat ourselves about our
Angst.
Not the last.
Thank you.
I think the angst is well understood, and
Yeah.
It's like anything, trying to get the data in-house, and I don't want to speak for Tess, but I'll try for a second and just say, trying to get your arms around from different financial departments and sections inside of that, that agency, and try to cull that down and get that has been a process that she's been spearheading, with us on our behalf, and that has unveiled with some of these invoices the reduction that you're seeing. We still have some other things we want to work with them through to get through, because you would think 4 weeks would be enough, but it's a big ship. So we're going to continue to work, into July, but I'm very confident that we're going to be able to get there.
Yeah, and would it be safe to say, Tess, this is not the only math problem you're working on?
I'm sure.
That's correct. Not the only math problem.
And I think we all recognize you've got a big territory and a lot of moving parts, and so I just wanted to underscore that in our appreciation, right?
Thank you.
It's taking you away from other priorities, so.
I think it also sets the tone that, we are looking very, very closely. I mean, I'm sure this is not going to be the only opportunity that we have to work with PG&E, but that we are looking very closely. And, so we do appreciate that. So that'll set the tone going forward.
Hey,
Thank you.
I would like to thank you all for attending today, and thank you, Tess. Appreciate all your hard work, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Sounds good.
And John, good to see you again.
Nice.
Okay, we're going to move on to item K. Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency budget adoption, and Mr. Costa is going to take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board. I'm going to provide a very brief overview of our fiscal year 23-24 CTSA budget, and then I will be asking the board for approval of that budget moving forward. So just to recap on the revenues, there's approximately a 16% increase in revenues for the CTSA. A majority of that increase is due to a large amount of carryover from fiscal year 22-23, which is the current fiscal year. And a lot of that carryover actually has ties to the fact that there's some work elements and programs in the CTSA that we didn't deliver this year, but we're delivering next year, such as the Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan, as well as our commitment to Sierra College and other programs for funding. Now to go over the expenses, overall our administrative expenses, which are tied to our fiscal year 23-24 overall work program, which was adopted by the board last month, increased by about 14%, and that increase is predominantly due to the additional resources that are being programmed for the CTSA to cover the planning efforts for the Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan. In addition, the outreach line that you see is programmed to implement the marketing plan that the CTSA board approved in January. Very quickly over some of the core programs. We have 4 core programs with the CTSA administered by our partners both at the City of Roseville as well as Seniors First. Those programs are being proposed for next year around a similar similar cost and expense as we had in the current fiscal year, with the exception of the South Placer Transit Information or Call Center, which is administered by Roseville, which you do see a significant increase. That increase is predominantly due to the fact that in this current fiscal year 22-23, Roseville actually utilized an accrued savings to cover the expenses of their costs of their call center. And so that savings is now depleted, and so now they're going back to the CTSA consistent with their agreement with the CTSA for funding for the next fiscal year. And then of course you see the Placer Rides, the Transit Ambassador and Mobility Training programs have a relative increase for next year. And then, as I mentioned, too, the bulk of the Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan, which is being funded by the CTSA, is going to be started in fiscal year 23-24. So that work began a little bit this year, which I'll talk about in my next item, but then the bulk of it will be next year. And then some of the large commitments that I mentioned earlier, we did in the current fiscal year, 22-23, committed to funding a portion of the South Placer Express service, which we talked about a little earlier in the last item with David's item. And that funding commitment, because that service has not started, is being carried over into the next fiscal year to fund when the service does start. And then the Sierra College Transit Pass program, we're going on to year 2 of that pilot program, and so we are continuing funding that according to our agreements with Sierra College. Consistent with practices with our overall work program and our budget, we are maintaining a 15% reserve, and that leaves us with approximately an increase of 11% for our expenses for the next fiscal year for the CTSA. So with that, this budget was developed concurrent with our Transit Operating Working Group, or our TOG, and it was approved by the TOG in May as well as our TAC in June, and staff is recommending the board's approval today. I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Board, questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, on the Sierra College, the increase in the budget, are they going back fully in person? Is that why? And so that's the $50,000 increase anticipating?
Yeah, the slight increase.
More utilization of that?
Correct. It is anticipating a slightly higher utilization as well as implementation of the transportation network component, which should start in the fall as well.
Thank you.
And I noticed that the jurisdictions are just getting a 50% reimbursement from that. So, okay, and that will remain, it'll just be 50%, and then we have to absorb that additional 50%.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone online? Okay, no public comments? Okay, so.
Move approval.
Okay, all right, approving the fiscal year 2023-24 Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency budget as presented in the staff report. Roll call, please.
Broadway, he stepped out. Burris,
Yes.
Cortez, Dowden Calvillo, Holmes, Haudashelt,
Aye.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on. 2L, PCTPA WSP Master Agreement Amendment and approval of the Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Short Range Transit Plan Project Letter of Task Agreement. And this is going to be Mike Costigan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that the Lincoln Rail study was a very good segment into this item, which I'm excited to present to the board today. Back in, I would say, the start of fiscal year 21-22, we started having discussions both at the board level and with our partnering agencies about looking at how we can enhance or improve transit here in the entire Western Placer region. The other thing to consider, of course, is how are we recovering from the pandemic, and how are our services, which was mentioned by actually Peter Eklund earlier, recovering among their different service options, or like commuter versus fixed route, et cetera. So we want to have this now project that we're working on that looks at that and what can we do moving forward to plan services in the near future that address some of these impacts, as well as the implementation by all of our 3 transit operators of on-demand app-based microtransit service. And so how does that look, and what does that play, what role does that service play in our network moving forward? So we did actually begin formal scoping efforts for the Comprehensive Operational Analysis or Short Range Transit Plan, which I'm just going to refer to as COA or SRTP moving forward. We began those formal scoping activities in the spring of this year, and we worked very closely with all of our transit operators, as well as our on-call consultants, WSP and LSC, to develop a very robust scope of services and tasks for this COA and short-range transit planning effort, which I'm going to dive in now. So as I mentioned, the action that you're looking at today is actually to continue working with our on-call consultants, WSP, with sub-consultants, LSC and M&J advisors, to move forward and look at, again, what does the future of our service in Placer County look like? Our original agreement with WSP, which is something that has a cap to it. It's for on-call planning services. We are asking the board to increase that compensation amount so that we can conclude this work, which is anticipated to cost around $650,000 over the next 2 fiscal years. And then essentially this cost, as you approved in your last action, is being covered by our CTSA budget. And the COA portion of our work will focus on both Placer County Transit and Auburn Transit services, because Roseville will be doing a concurrent COA of their services. So we're going to be coordinating very closely with our partners at Roseville to make sure that our COA service plan ties into also the Roseville Transit Service Plan and vice versa. And then our short-range transit plan, which is the second component of this project, will take those plans, those combined plans, and move them forward into implementation over the next 5 to 10 years. So looking at the scope of work for the COA, again, we're focused on Placer County Transit and Auburn Transit. And we're really going to be looking at a variety of different things, and starting with the evaluation of how is the service performing today, looking at all the records of our unmet transit needs, looking at all of the performance that's happening today with the considerations of the impact of the pandemic, as well as our microtransit services and everything that's going on in this region, including what's happening in Sacramento too, and the commute patterns and demand in those areas. We're going to also be looking at a different evaluation of transit service delivery mix and network design options. And what service delivery mix is essentially your fixed route or commuter or van pool or microtransit services. And then network design focuses on anything from route structure, functions, transfer points, bus stop locations, transfer mobility hubs, et cetera. So we'll be looking at all of that in our western / South Placer region. We're going to be developing a variety of service scenarios, and those scenarios will be looking at both frequency coverage options as well as looking at cost options and what's also happening with the commuter service, and looking at if commuter service does return, what's going to happen if demand for that service increases, or if it doesn't increase, what is our service network going to look like? So that's what we're looking at in our service scenarios, and from that we will be developing a preferred service plan to move forward into the short-range transit plan. Now, the short-range transit plan, as I mentioned, is going to cover all 3 transit operators, including our CTSA programs that supplement public transit where public transit is not able to be provided. And it'll be looking at a service plan span of about 5 years with some broader considerations for 10 years moving forward. And as part of that short-range transit plan, we're really going to be looking at programs, services, policies, and guidelines to implement that service plan, and how can we further coordinate among our operations to have the best services moving forward. And as part of all of these efforts, we're going to have very extensive community outreach, which I'm not going to go over everything, but essentially we are creating a special technical advisory committee that consists of our TOG members as well as some additional stakeholders that will meet consistently throughout the process, as well as we are going to go out into the community with pop-up events and specific planned workshops and focus groups that can gather input throughout this whole 2-year process. And then just to provide a very quick overview, we are planning to kickstart the COA Short-Range Transit Plan officially in July following this board's approval today. And then we're going to be conducting our outreach probably as early as August/September. And then we're going to be developing and preparing the COA service plan for implementation, hopefully by July of next year. That'll then move us into the short-range transit plan, which will be completed hopefully by spring of 2025. So with that, staff is recommending 2 actions today. One is to amend the master agreement with WSP to allow for this work, and to also, second action is to approve the letter of task agreement with WSP to officially begin this project. The TAC and the TOG both concurred with this action, and I am available for questions if you have any. And also our consultant team is available online as well.
Okay, board members, questions?
I have none.
No? Okay, so, all right, do I have a motion to? Oh, yes, public comment.
Got a lot of helpers. You got a lot of helpers.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Peter
Yes.
Eklund, you're
Hi.
free to speak.
Yes, Peter Eklund again. I strongly support this project, and, broad scope of work it's difficult to kind of look at all the necessary things that have to be done, but I do have to say I have faith that together Matt and Mike Costa will do what needs to be done to make this a worthwhile project and a necessary project. It's the first time that the planning has been done together for the 2 major transit operators, PCT and Roseville, and there's at least 5 locations where there needs to be some integration of services because of either their because of borders of the cities and because of routes or potential routes. And it's the only way it can be done, by doing it all together. And I hearken back to the only other study that was done that included everybody was in 2007. It was called the Master Plan for South Placer Service, and it emphasized the words integrate and consolidation. So that all features of a transit system, there's accountability and delineation of who's responsible, and nothing has really happened since then, and to do those kinds of things. Apparently in 2009 there was some effort to do it, but and so this is really a way to look at organizational issues that are kind of below the hood right now, as well as just the operations on the road. So once again, I strongly support it. It needs to be done. The money to do it is there, and you have the staff that's committed to doing a good job and getting people to agree to in a cooperative way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Eklund. Anyone else?
Move agenda item.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Roll call, please.
Okay. Let's see. Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calhoun.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to item M, Nevada Station Building Surplus Land Act determinations.
Yes, hi, Madam Chair. So this time last month, we came to you and asked for, Executive Director asked for authority to look at options to sell the Nevada Station building. And as part of that conversation, Director Dowden Calvillo said, hey, did you guys think about the Surplus Lands Act? We said, we talked about it, but let's look at it some more. And so we got with General Counsel and looked at it, and we do have to comply with it. And so thank you for that, for the heads up. So really what we're asking today, the action what we're asking is for you to adopt Resolution 2323. And basically what it says is that the Executive Director will, follow the Surplus Lands Act and negotiate in good faith in accordance with the act as part of the dissolution of the property. So that's the action we're asking for today.
Okay,
Move item.
I'll second.
okay, motion and second. Can we have roll call?
Public comment, Madam
I'm sorry,
Chair.
public comment. Hello, public.
Got some quick draws here.
You guys are fast.
And no public.
Oh,
And it's okay for public comment to come after a motion in a second. There's nothing wrong.
That does all the time, yes.
I have a question prior to taking action. So is there a known interested party? I wasn't at the May board meeting.
At this, I apologize, Dan. At this time, there's not a known interested party.
Okay.
What we were asking in May is to enter into a commercial contract with a commercial real estate firm, CBRE, to list the property to then begin it. So there's no financial implication of this action. If there is an interested party, they come forward, we can't negotiate in good faith, there is no deal. So this is just to allow us to start to explore. Yep.
Okay, good. So, roll call.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez, Dowden Calvillo, Holmes, Ardeshell,
Aye.
Joyner, Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're moving on to item N, updated salary schedule.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep the mic here for a bit. Let me just start and talk about, as part of my onboarding as sort of the lead fiduciary for the agency, we've been going through and kicking the tires of the finances and doing a lot of stuff. The past action as far as regarding the building is part of that. Looking through the employee policies, salary schedule, things of that nature, it became evident to me that we needed to update some employee classifications, add some new classifications, and update our salary schedule. So then looking at, okay, how do we go about doing that? We brought together the administrative committee last month in accordance with our bylaws. And so what I want to present to you all today briefly is the same presentation that the administrative committee saw in May, so you all have the same amount of information. So in May we met, and basically we wanted to talk about a few things. Updating existing position descriptions, adding new position descriptions, updating our salary schedule, and then there's a very administrative PERS benefit calculation adjustment that we also spoke about. One of the things we briefed the administrative committee on, which just for clarity was Chair Jones, Vice Chair Broadway, and Director Holmes as the longest serving member of the board. We realized that the committee hadn't met since 2016, and what we were asking for in that administrative committee meeting is for recommendations to be made to this full board here today in June. I also want to be very clear that none of the actions being asked for have any fiscal impact to PCTPA if you were to take action in our favor on what we're asking today. What you're simply doing is you're allowing me, the executive director, to update employee policies and the salary schedule. We currently only have 9 position classifications. We'd like to add 5 additional classifications. You can see those there in bold. Why do we want to do that? Well, we are currently investigating the possibility of a measure in November of '24. If the board chooses to put a funding measure on the ballot and we are then successful at the polls, what that will mean is the beginning of a delivery program that we don't currently have. Associated with that delivery program will be the need for additional financial, administrative, and engineering help. We've got one engineer here, but we've only got one, and we actually don't have any engineering classification inside of this agency. So I do not have the ability to hire an associate or a senior engineer, for instance. So we sort of want to get ahead of that. So we want to add the positions for that reason, and also the need for the growth of our existing staff as well. Regarding the salary schedule, it has not been updated to reflect labor rates since 2016. So 2 of my employees are maxed out at the salary cap, meaning I cannot give them any merit adjustment. I don't have the ability to do that. I have 1 within 2% of the cap and 2 within 12%. So 5 of the 6 staff are either currently or soon will be capped, and the ability to give merit adjustments will no longer be possible. So the bottom line is we need to update the salary schedule to reflect the labor market since this hasn't been done in over 7 years. So how do we do that? Well, we conducted a salary survey to inform our recommendations. Jody, our fiscal officer, contacted 19 like organizations, 16 of which gave us information back, which was great. And this is who we contacted. So these are the like organizations that we looked at. And then what we did is we essentially, for clarity, we only looked and gathered information on the exact same employee classifications. We didn't try to crosswalk them in between. And so the spreadsheet, or the cutout of that spreadsheet you're looking at, is the information, the salary maximums by exact classification by the 16 of the 19 agencies that we contacted. We then came up with a methodology to look at the median of the top 3 classifications to set a new salary max per classification. You know, at first we tried to say, well, are there 2 of these agencies that are really just like PCTPA, or are there 4, are there 5? And to be honest, that didn't prove fruitful. So we thought the best thing to do was to take a median of the set. And that's how we got to here. So what you are looking at is the recommended new salary schedule for the existing and in bold new positions, if you approve them, for PCTPA. I also want to be very clear, this does not affect my salary. There will be no change to the executive director's salary, and you can see that bolded in high. That classification will remain the same. This is only for staff. And just quickly, we also wanted to meet with the administrative committee about some PERS compliance. This is very weedy, but we had to change sort of 8 or 9 words in our language relative to the cafeteria plan, also cost neutral, which was the last item we spoke with last May with the administrative committee. In sum, we need to add 5 new position descriptions. That's what staff's asking for. We need to update 9. We need to update the salary schedule to reflect the labor market, update and change the PERS employee benefit calculation language. So these are the actions we're asking for. We asked the committee to make recommendations to the board for this June and then bring action to you here today. The findings of the committee, they're here, they can represent themselves, but there was unanimous concurrence with staff findings and recommendations across the board with staff, concurrence with staff. So what we're asking is to add the 5 new, update the 9, and update the salary schedule. I think that's the end of my deck, so we can get to questions. Yeah.
Okay, board members.
I have a question. I'm assuming that we would have the opportunity, we, the board, would have the opportunity to approve the classifications, the new classification specifications for the positions that you're wanting to create? Or
yes.
Not having been here before, I mean,
Yes.
I'm just assuming that if we're authorizing the creation of additional positions, that you'll bring those back for us to review and approve, ultimately, correct?
Yes,
Or-
and they actually were all reviewed by the administrative committee. All of the position descriptions were in the packet that were provided to the administrative committee, but we can bring them back. You want all of the language.
I just haven't had an opportunity to take a look at them. That's
Yeah.
kind of my wheelhouse, so.
Sure. The short answer is of course.
Yeah.
They're educational requirements, work experience, summary of
So-
duties, all of that.
I would like to be able to have that opportunity to take a look at it and the classifications. I'm not on the admin committee, so I didn't
Sure.
see those.
Absolutely, and this is my first time getting into the weeds through this too. But we'd of course be happy to share all of that.
Generally speaking, I know for many of the organizations I've sat on, that when you do create new positions, the classifications would come to the board for review and approval.
Okay.
So I think that, I'd like to have that come back to us, and then.
So is that the case that you want to
It almost,
table this until?
with all due respect, I would like to just continue this item so that we can have, the board has an opportunity to take a look at everything that the admin committee had, and then we can take a look at this, so.
Yes,
Can I,
yes, please.
I'm
I
sorry.
want to hear your reaction to that.
Is there any urgency to approving this?
Well, we're not going to meet in July. We might not meet in August. I mean, my only urgency is relative to merit increase to staff, but I also understand the.
We could make that retroactive, so I mean,
Yeah.
that, I don't want to
Yeah.
take away from staff, and we can absolutely make it retroactive, but, I just think for consistency purposes, really it is the practice for the board to approve these kinds of things, so I mean,
Yeah, I was just going by the bylaws and provided the entire
Oh.
packages to the administrative committee for concurrence to the full board, So I wasn't in sitting thinking we
Yeah, no
had to
worries.
bring
And I just
to you
didn't-
all 9 position classifications.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yes, it's your
I
hope.
see that my colleague over there is hemming and hawing.
Well, I just don't want to get in the way of
I don't want to get in the way
process
either.
that we
It's-
entrust the administrative committee to review on with our interest in mind. I have no idea what the words are in the classification. and
Yes, I
what we
just-
might change or recommend to the administrative committee, but I mean, with no meeting in July and no meeting in August, I really don't want to,
I don't wanna-
It's easy to do retroactive.
Yeah, with the utmost respect, again, all of us as council members and supervisors are doing the same thing. We're not we as electeds are approving those. I mean, as you know, my employer is Sacramento County with more than 12,000 employees. So the Board of Supervisors are still approving all those classifications. I don't mean to delay, and I just think, this happens so infrequently. You said the admin committee last met on the 16th, but even, the material wasn't in the packet for us to review. So even if it had just been in here, I would have had the opportunity to take a look at it, and then I could have said, hey, I might suggest that you do this to open up your opportunity for recruitment. So, again, that's kind of my wheelhouse, and so there might be things that we could add that would help things. So, and it wasn't here, so I haven't had the chance to take a look at it.
Let me see if I can drill down on this. So 2 of the 6 employees are salary capped. Have their job classifications changed?
No, no, those job classifications have not changed. The major action is the addition of the 5, which come from that list. For instance, the engineering classifications, we borrowed heavily from Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority to see what they require for an associate and a senior engineer. So we went to the same 19 agencies to find, largely for the administrative and engineering descriptions, go-bys, and then augmented them. So as far as the, 0 to 5 years, bachelor's degree, civil engineer, licensed engineer, that sort of thing.
So let me ask my colleague if she would.
In all honesty,
I haven't even thrown my idea at you.
Oh, sorry.
So would you consider approving the employee salary update for all employees whose classifications haven't changed?
So, I highly recommend that we take a look at everything in totality. I think that bifurcating the process can be detrimental depending on what any potential changes. I think we've got a great staff. It's not that I don't trust you. I absolutely trust you. I'm just saying that, for consistency purposes, we, as electeds, we have that opportunity, and there may be something in there that we can offer that might be of assistance. So I have no problem if we continue the item, and then if we want to make the increases, the salary adjustments retroactive. I mean, again, we are not approving any salary increases. This is simply what our executive director is asking us to do, is to adjust the salary range. And that when it is time for the merit increases during performance review and so forth, that would be the time that he would either approve an additional step or not, correct? I mean, you have a process for taking a look at those kinds of things.
Generally, yes. I also would have the discretion to promote outside
Sure.
of cycle, correct?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, but you have that process in place.
Right.
So we're not being asked to give people raises, we're simply being asked to adjust that salary raise. But that salary range, but I would just like to continue the item so that we can take a look at, what I'd really like to do is have an opportunity to take a look at all the all the classifications, just to compare, because you are establishing new ones that could potentially have some dual responsibilities and so forth, so.
Can you put those back on the screen, that one chart, the slide with all the new
Let me go back. You tell me when you want me to.
Yeah, and that's in the packet.
This guy,
which-
or?
Yeah, it's on 86.
I think it's the
This one?
one that's in the
No,
packet.
back with the whole thing with all the classifications.
This is all the classifications on the
I
right?
was thinking about
Yep,
it.
the bold is the new.
Okay, so we've got
The
1,
normal is the
2,
existing.
3, 4, 5, the addition of 5. Homes, remember Homes once, you have a question?
So you're not hiring anybody right now, you're just having the opportunity to fulfill those classifications when you're ready to hire.
That's correct.
Okay, and so I don't understand why we have to go do any delay and.
Because the classification specifications will be utilized in the recruitment and hiring of individuals. So I mean, that's what you base it on. When you go to advertise, you have your class spec that says this is what the job is, these are what the minimum requirements are. So it's a tool in that process. So I'll make it easy. If there's not a majority that wants to continue, then that's so be it. So I will move to continue this item until our August meeting and just ask that we have the class specs that come back to us. And so I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
I second.
Okay, I guess we will.
Can we hear from
Let's
the
have, we can have more
administrative
discussion,
committee
yeah.
who actually reviewed?
Sure, I believe.
Well, and, yeah, so I apologize, I had to step out, so I was not here for the totality of the discussion. I guess my question, Alice, would be, do you have concerns or questions regarding the committee which is essentially set up for this purpose in order to review this, and that we did not effectively execute in our role?
I do not distrust the committee's work. It's just that I would, before I'm asked to approve new classifications, I'd like to see the class specs. That's all. And when we have an admin committee that takes a look at the budget, or I'm not saying this particular entity, but in our other worlds, when we have committees that take a look at things, they still come back to the council. We have an opportunity to review it. So if the class specs and everything had been in here and I had a chance to take a look at them, then I would not ask to continue them. But all I have is just the 2-page sheet. So I'm being asked to create positions and I have not seen the class specs. It's not that I don't trust you, I just haven't had a chance to take a look at them. And I would just like to see them, that's all. Again, this is kind of my wheelhouse, and so, you know, oftentimes there are ways that you can word things to help open up recruitment and have more flexibility and things of that nature. So, I mean, and again, I will respect the decision of this board, and if there's not a willingness to do that, then so be it. No hard feelings. But that's just why I'm asking, is just simply because I'm being asked to take a look and approve positions that I just haven't seen the class specs for.
And while I can appreciate that, we did go through the process working with our staff in looking at this. And my fear is this is where, as a political body and as electeds and as running municipalities, we fall into paralysis to analysis. We have a process. And
well, that never happens.
We've had the opportunity to review this. We had the committee review it. I think also it's incumbent upon us, if we have these type of questions, that we wouldn't come here, that we get the packet and we would have asked to do that. I'm confident that the effort has been made, the analysis has been done. I think if you would like to review that, and you certainly have that information provided to you, but I do not feel that there is a need at this point in time to delay this process. I think we've followed the process, we've followed what we're required to do, and I think we need to move this forward. I don't really believe that delaying it is going to change the outcome anyway. If I felt strongly that way, I certainly would, but I just don't, and I think that we need to continue moving forward with this.
So the question that I have then for staff is, did you say the bylaws say that the admin committee is solely responsible for reviewing these documentation? Is that the way the bylaws are written? I don't remember. I mean, if we're following the process, did the bylaws say?
Yeah, I cannot right now quote you chapter and verse the bylaws. We reviewed the bylaws to impanel the administrative committee. We saw, and I apologize that she's not here. She's got a family emergency that Deanne's not here. But we sought the advice of our general counsel. She set up this process. We then followed it with the survey and the classifications.
So I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to be a cog and stop the process. I just, it's just my position. So
Madam Chair,
I'll call for the question, and we'll just let it go, you know, the way that it falls.
Okay. My last comment was if there's a need to update the bylaws, that might be something you want to recommend at a later date, but, okay. So we've had.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you know.
Motion and a second.
Gosh, we're already into our our Sparta one.
I
just
if we
want
call-
to
if we
I
just
just
call
want to
for the question and
understand,
then-
just make sure I understand. You're updating the salary schedule, and this is the first time it's been updated since 2016.
Correct.
Those job descriptions for those 9 have not changed.
Correct.
Okay. And between 2016 and today, I've only been here since 2019, the executive officer, the executive director, the person in your position had the ability to make merit raises and everything else with respect to that.
And I
So
do have
without
to,
the board having.
for clarity
look
to the
at
record, Director
classifications.
Howdeshell, there were 2 of the 9 positions where I adjusted the years of experience from 0 to 3 to 0 to 5. I mean, it was extremely minor, but there were a couple small administrative tweaks to the existing 9 positions, but they were very minor.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll have a roll call, please, on the motion to
Continue.
continue.
I don't think there was a second.
There was
Yes,
a
there
second
was.
by
Yeah.
Cortez.
Ms. Cortez.
No.
Oh, did Trinity?
I'm sorry, I went to come off mute.
You're with us now. Burris, this is a motion to
No.
continue. No. Cortez?
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Holmes?
No.
Howdeshell?
No.
Joyner?
No.
Jones?
No.
Wilkins?
No.
Motion to continue does not pass.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that the PCTPA board take action to update the PCTPA salary schedule for all existing and newly created positions except for the executive director.
Second.
Okay, motion is second.
To the question, can I request that in the future, if we do have classification changes that are proposed, that they be included in the packet so we can at least see them?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would also request, I'd like to see them anyway.
Yeah. And if I could, through the chair, I was taking a note. I would like to, after this, work with you and share that all with you.
Yeah, that'd be
And
great.
set up a one-on-one to review them with you and get your input.
Sure, thank you.
There are actually many things where we get a one sheet, such as the report, the draft report that we reviewed or had presented to us earlier today, where I would have liked to have seen a draft included in the packet, so that we could know what the discussion is gonna be and not see it on the screen for the first time. So just as a matter of practice.
Sure.
If we've got information available.
Yep.
That of an information junkie, put it in the packet so that we can all access it if need be.
I agree, I appreciate that too. Not that I'm asking for more material to read, but I think that,
Well, if you put it online,
Transparency.
if you put it online, you can print it if you want, and then and you won't be responsible for printing and wasting a bunch of trees. Go ahead with your
All right,
roll call.
I got a motion and a second. I
Yes.
will be taking roll?
Yes, call for the question.
Okay. Broadway?
Yes.
What about,
Burris?
Yes.
Cortez?
Oh, I'm so sorry, I was lost in what we were re-voting on.
To approve.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Holmes? Howdeshell?
aye.
Joyner?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, item O, we have the executive director's report.
Okay. Sherry, why don't you start coming up as I'm rolling through this here in the interest of time. Just a few things. I'll move quickly through this. Lots of good news. So the I-80 Aux Lanes construction contract was executed on the 16th of June. They have 120 days to start. All indications from the contractors, they're willing and want to get going. Caltrans and PCTPA have been in conversations with my counterpart, Amarjeet, in District 3. We'd like to have a groundbreaking late summer. Hot off the presses, we've got a date, August 1st. You'll all be invited. You'll see a hold on your calendar from Solvay.
Okay.
Most likely 10 a.m., but we'll try to block out your morning, August 1st groundbreaking. So that'll be super exciting. CCJPA third track, some of you know, Directors Holmes and Howdeshell definitely know from their role on CCJPA that we will be securing $25 million in SCC grant funding, also being voted on today at the CTC. Due to this late hour, they might have already approved it. It was only item 16 or 18. So really good news. There was also money, $25 million for Sac Valley Station improvements. I want to take an opportunity to thank David Melko. And David was not the first person to work on this, but he was the closer and he was the last. And everybody's important, and all these projects take thousands and thousands of people. But David helped bring home the 25 million, and I just want to publicly tell him thank you for his work. Just great job, David. No July board meeting, and maybe no August meeting. We're going to look if we're going to have a substantial enough agenda to merit a meeting in August. With that, we thought it would be fun to give you a little bit of an update on the funding measure, the outreach campaign. And I think last time I promised you some commercials. Cherry gets, we get to do all this stuff, and so Cherry gets to do the fun stuff. She gets to do all the interesting, neat stuff. So Cherry, you want to talk to about the outreach?
Yes, funding measure outreach program update, because remember, we're a public agency and we're not advocating for anything, but we are publicly educating. So can I?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Okay, so where did we leave off? April 2022 with a research presentation that FM3 gave with a soft 67% that we recommended that we don't go to the ballot. You all made a great choice in not putting the measure on the ballot, for sure. So what have we done since then? We waited, got through the election, through the end of the year. We have added some new team members to our program, which we have Andy here. He'll be doing a few slides in this presentation. And we also have really changed the focus from where in the past we would ramp up around research phases. This is now just a steady stream of activity and digital and targeted mailers and all of these good things, which Andy will talk about in greater detail. But individual one-on-one stakeholder engagement, community group and partner presentations, partner collaborations, and community event sponsorship. So there we have, Suzanne, you're probably like, oh my gosh, you're doing that. But nevertheless, this is a snapshot of all of the different logos of the organizations that we have been working with pretty much this whole time, but in a different, more aggressive way. So the individual one-on-one stakeholder meetings, those are business leaders, community leaders, elected leaders, people that will help us get to their networks in education. Community group and partner presentations, these are like the Sun City groups that we're working with. Partner collaborations, that would be like the city of Roseville and the work that we're doing there, city of Lincoln, city of Rockland. And then those community event sponsorships, which I will say, we're a little bit more targeted there too. We're wanting to understand, who are the folks attending? How is this being, publicized? What are we doing? Just to make sure that we're always good stewards of taxpayer funds as we're out there educating around this. So with that, I'm going to have Andy come up here and introduce Andy, because he actually gets the most fun part of the presentation. Andy, go ahead. And
Hi, how do you do? My name is Andy Galloway. I'm an account executive with Threefold Communications in Sacramento. We've been working closely with PCTPA on the first phase of this campaign. I'm going to try to move forward one slide. So our campaign creative is currently broken into two parts. There's a small segment that addresses seniors, especially in the Sun City resident area, as well as in rural areas. The positioning here on the value exchange for our messaging is around emergency response rates. This is less of a commuting crowd, less of a crowd trying to go out on a Friday or Saturday night or early on a Monday morning, but they're definitely concerned about traffic coming to them. In addition to this smaller segment, we have the large main marketing message, which is really around the pain points that folks in Placer County are finding and feeling with the traffic congestion. That really spans three major issues at this point, which is around unneeded performance, high-end cars, great quality of life, but all at 5 miles an hour. The inconvenience that traffic places on one's life, and then also the wear and tear on one's vehicle. I can play these ads now, though, if you want to take a quick look.
I was just going to let you on a click. It'll.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you. So these 15-second ads, I have two more, will be complemented with 30-second versions coming shortly that have narrative and VO that actually expands upon the storytelling. And then later in the fall, we will switch up creative again to get a little bit closer to the issue. So I'll note that on the right you can tell the platforms that we'll be using these videos on include connected TV, which I can expand upon in a minute. Also geo-targeting mobile display, that's actually where we use GPS on people's phones to target a specific area and deliver directly to their phones. So whether they are on their browser, they're using a social media network on their phone, because they're in that actual physical space, we can target their phone and deliver ads to them. And then the last place we'll be placing these as well is on Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram as well. And this is our last 15-second. I'll talk a little bit about the media mix. Our comprehensive approach of this audience of swing voters in the Placer area focuses heavily on a cross-platform reach using print with the Sun City publications, social media using Facebook and Instagram, and then also connected TV, geofencing of special areas, and direct mail. Let me take a moment to talk about connected TV because that's sometimes the harder one to understand. This is an example of sort of the touch points that could happen within a week for any given person in Placer based on this plan. I won't read every little bit of this, but basically we would touch them through social media that they're on during the day, through the TV that they'd be watching at work or at home, as well as through their print or email. Connected TV, I'll just explain briefly. If you've ever used a streaming device like a Fire Stick or Roku, or maybe your Samsung TV has a built-in connectivity as well, we have access to all of that. That then lets us get into the actual platforms themselves. So maybe you use Hulu, Sling, BritBox, anybody, and then the actual streamers themselves plus the channels. So it's very agnostic to the programming. We don't have to talk about the context of the programming. We let the ads go right to the people themselves based on their geographic location. Any questions I can field at this time?
So much more complicated now.
Yep.
Any favorite commercials?
So these have been playing for a few weeks. We're hoping to have more data to indicate trends around the storytelling soon as this campaign continues to roll out.
Will I see it on my YouTube TV? I mean,
Absolutely.
Does that get fed into that? I didn't see
You
it.
got it. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Not Apple TV.
Facebook Live.
Yeah.
And then the Matt Click TikTok, is that available for our viewing?
That was internal. That was just internal.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's why they're taking pictures today.
So one
Yes,
thing I want to
before we
talk.
Before we go further, I have a question for
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry, I'm
Dan.
sorry.
Yes.
Why don't you finish, then I'll.
Are you sure?
Okay.
Okay. Well, the one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, so, and it ties together what Andy just talked about. So if we look at what's on the screen here, this is basically what we have planned between July and October. We have a lot, right? We have a lot of community events. We're Hot Chili Cool Cars. We're doing the Lincoln Airport Open House this year. So take the airport open house, okay, as an example. So what Andy's talking about is, working with those organizers, we can understand where those attendees will be coming from, and we can actually start to make sure that they see the educational advertising that we have going on, 3 days before they get there, 3 days after they get there, whatever it is that they want to do. So it's really, a lot of you have been out in the past and have done these, presentations or been part of these presentations, and we always get questions, right? We always get questions. I was with Mike Costa at the Roseville Chamber. He got a question from somebody who wanted to know what we're doing about the 65. My point in telling that story is that education is happening all the time and continues to happen, and you think we've been doing this for a long time, everybody is educated. They're not. There's still many, many different audiences that we're trying to get in front of to make sure that they understand what's going on. So we really want to try to be everywhere that we can be. We want to be good, stewards of taxpayer funds and make sure that we are educating everyone in a place that's familiar to them, right? So that is something new that we are doing in, like I said, a steady drumbeat this cycle of the program that has been different than years past. So with that, I will take any questions.
Please.
Great information. It's more of a comment than a question, and you just touched on it. What we're funding is public information and education,
Yeah.
as opposed to a advocacy effort.
That's correct, yeah.
So there was just a couple of buzzwords that caught my attention in the earlier presentation. You know, the word campaign could be, I think it's a public information campaign, shouldn't be misconstrued as a vote yes or vote no campaign. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we just want to make sure as we're kind of referring to what we're doing, we're kind of emphasizing that this is public information and public education, that it's not a advocacy campaign. And I know that you're well aware of that.
Excellent point, and I will.
Sometimes you can, sometimes certain words can mean different things to different people.
Well, and honestly, I think it's for us, mostly Andy and myself, because, you know, we talk about a campaign, right? We don't just do this type of work, right? We do all sorts of work. So it's really for us to make sure that we're always differentiating between public education, this is a public education program, versus a campaign, things like that. So point well taken, for sure.
Okay, anyone else?
I'm still on for August 5th, Mojo's.
August 5th, Mojo's. Yes, yes, yes. Well, and on those, that's a great point, real quick. So we had Supervisor Jones's coffee, and, you know, people came to the LeBou, but what was actually really, you know, a secondary benefit of having that in-person moment was that we did digital advertising around that. So we have all of the data and the stats with the folks who maybe didn't come to the coffee, but they interacted with our website, and we know how long they spent on the website and all of those things. So that's actually a secondary benefit of those things that we're doing. So, okay, no more from me, unless anybody has
I
questions.
think we have a public comment. Mr. Garabedian, would you like to make a comment?
My comment, Mike Garabedian, is just this, that the agenda doesn't really explain what this is. You know, just, it names the consultant. So we really don't know what these informational items, you know, what the topic is. That would be helpful.
It was mostly just for us to update us on what we're going to be doing. This is for us, what we're going to be doing in the program. It'll be coming out, though, to the public. Yeah.
Well, I was talking about the specific agenda, you know, don't know what it means, and now we find out. You know, don't know if you want to be here or not, or speak to it or not.
Yeah, like,
thank you.
Did you want to address
If I
that?
could, through the chair, this is just a line item inside of the executive director's report. So this isn't an agendized, this isn't a formal agendized topic. It's just informational only. That's why you don't see it there that way. But in the future, we can do that. If that we're happy to.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
It's just an agenda, not a substantive comment.
Thank you.
And if I could, just finishing up the executive director's report, I wanted to just also save the best for last, and that's Director Cortez. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but you have 2 Loomis leadership graduates in your presence right now, and Mike and Corey. So congratulations to them. Yeah, and we've got 2 new Loomis leadership folks. They tell me they were joint valedictorian. I don't know if that's true or not.
There are only 2 students in the group.
Yeah. One's a salutatorian, so if you could confirm. But with that, I conclude the executive director's report. Thank you.
Okay. So, any board direction to the staff?
Nope. I think just reiterating Alice's point, which was followed by Paul's, in regard to the information that is provided in our packets, especially now that we have the option of asking that those just simply be provided to us in an electronic format, but having the detail, I think is very helpful and can prevent us from having to spend additional time. So, and ensure that, hey, if you have it and you don't need it, it's much easier than when you need it and don't have it.
And I would be remiss without thanking you for the delivery of the PowerPoints. They're always good.
Okay, and there's informational items there. Our next meeting, tentatively, August 23rd, if we don't cancel it. The July 26th meeting is canceled. Is there anything else to come before the board?
I was just going to mention, if we do have an August 23rd meeting, it is likely that I will be in Chamonix, so I would not be here. I have to have my alternate.
All right, okay, nothing.
Doing the city's business on my own dime.
I think we'll all go with you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, hearing nothing further, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, staff.